This happened to me almost a year back. I went to Jewel Osco with my mother, grandma, and brother. It was night time, things were calm. We went within the store and shopped for its slightest 20 minutes, sometime recently clearing out. When we did, we went into the stopping part, and my grandma taken note something bizarre. As we were beginning to approach our vehicle, there was a car that had a gather of individuals interior. The car was driving by us in an odd way. It was fare truly moderate, and appeared like everyone inside was observing us the total time. They drove past us, and after that stopped adjacent. We at that point saw many individuals come out of the car and begin to walk towards us. My grandma told us to induce interior the car rapidly. I may tell that she was frightened. She at that point yelled at my mother to drive us before long as we were in. My mother sped off just before the individuals had come to our car. Fortunately, they didn't take after us domestic. I inquired my grandma why she was frightened, and she told me she had an extremely awful feeling around the individuals. I'm not going to lie, I did have a terrible feeling as well. I'm happy that we were able to take off some time recently. They come to us, and nothing terrible happened. Approximately a year prior, I was driving back on my way domestic from work, which was sort of distant absent on that specific day. My work area changes regularly, and this was one of the more distant ones. It was night time presently, and likely around 9:00 p.m. The basic supply store appeared to be in a littler town, and it was a neighborhood one, so not very big. I stopped within the little stopping part, got out of my car, and strolled into the front entryways. When I got interior, things were exceptionally calm. I didn't require an entire lot of things. It's similar to 4 or 5 things. I began out within the produce and made my way all through the store. After a whereas, I realized that I might be the, as it were, client shopping within the whole store, since I hadn't seen anybody else at all. I wrapped up my shopping, which didn't take as well long, and after that I made my way to the check paths. This basic needs store, as it were, had 4 check paths. When I got to them, there were no workers at any of them. None were self-checkouts, so I had to wait there for a representative. I stood around holding up for a minute or two, and after that took a see around. No one else was within the whole store. There was a sort of spooky feeling in spite of the fact that. I pondered where everyone was. I took a couple of steps and looked down a few passageways, and I happened to be looking down the final path. I abruptly saw a man. He hadn't been there some time recently. He was strolling gradually from what showed up to be a back range. When he saw me, he nearly looked shocked. I inquired him on the off chance that he worked there. The fellow strolled closer to me some time recently, saying no. The fellow at that point inquired me how long I had been in here. I told the fellow I had gotten some things and needed to check out, but couldn't discover any of the workers. He told me that he thought he saw a fellow within the back and offered to require me to him. I told him no, much obliged. I thought that sounded kind of weird. All of a sudden, I looked out the window, since I'd taken note blazing lights coming down the road. I had no thought what they were for, but the man that I had been talking to darted absent within the opposite direction. Less than a diminutive afterward, the blazing lights were at the basic supply store that I was in, and I saw police drawing closer the entryway. I had no thought what was going on, but I was told by an officer to take off the store as a few more police strolled in. I was told that the man who had been inside the store had attacked the, as it were, worker who was working, and after that the worker had fled the store and called police. Things began to create sense to me at that point. The police were able to urge the fellow who was interior, but after this encounter, I feel truly fortunate to be affirmed. I can't accept that I was alone with that fellow within the store for so long and indeed talked to him. I wrapped up my shopping, which didn't take as well long, and after that I made my way to the checked paths. This basic needs store, as it were, have 4 checked paths. When out to them, there were no workers at any of them. None were self-checkout, so I had to wait there for a representative. I stood around holding up for a minute or two, and after that took a see around. No one else was within the whole store. There was a sort of spooky feeling in spite of the fact that I pondered where everyone was. I took a couple of steps and looked down a few passageways, and I happened to be looking down the final path. I abruptly saw a man. He hadn't been there some time recently. He was strolling gradually from what showed up to be a back range. When he saw me, he nearly looked shocked. I inquired him on the off chance that he worked there. The fellow strolled closer to me some time recently, saying no. The fellow at that point inquired me how long I had been in here. I told the fellow I had fair gotten some things and needed to check out, but couldn't discover any of the workers. He told me that he thought he saw a fellow within the back and offered to require me to him. I told him no, much obliged. I thought that sounded kind of weird. All of a sudden, I looked out the window, since I'd taken note blazing lights coming down the road. I had no thought what they were for, but the man that I had been talking to darted absent within the opposite direction. Less than a diminutive afterward, the blazing lights were at the basic supply store that I was in, and I saw police drawing closer the entryway. I had no thought what was going on, but I was told by an officer to take off the store, as a few more police strolled in. I was told that the man who had been inside the store had attacked the, as it were, worker who was working, and after that the worker had fled the store and called the police. Things began to create sense to me at that point. The police were able to urge the fellow who was interior, but after this encounter, I feel truly fortunate to be affirmed. I can't accept that I was alone with that fellow within the store for so long, and indeed talked to him. Sometimes I go grocery shopping after work. I work a lovely standard 9 to 5 work, and that's the foremost helpful time for me to go. One day I required a number of things, and was arranging on cooking something for supper. I ceased at my local grocery store, the same one I regularly do. When I got there, it was truly active. The stopping parcel had numerous cars in it, and when I got interior the store, there were very few individuals. It wasn't loathsome, but this was an exceptionally common shopping time for other individuals like myself, just getting off from work. I made my way around the store from path to walkway, picking up what I required along the way. I went through possibly 20 minutes and add up to shopping. When I was done, I utilized the self-checkout to pay for everything. After that, I strolled back to my car, put my foodstuffs in, and drove domestic. When I was nearly domestic, I halted at a gas station, since I realized that my gas tank was approximately 1/4. That's when I realized that I didn't have my wallet. I had it at the basic needs store, since I had paid for everything with it, but now it wasn't in my stash, where I continuously kept it. I quickly looked my car up and down, and indeed checked in all of my bags and everything. It fair basically wasn't there. This meant that I had to have cleared out it at the basic supply store. I keep in mind the scene at the self-checkout. It was very active. There were individuals at all the self-checkouts, and indeed a line of others holding up. But they did have representatives that stood close the checkouts, so there was a chance that in case some person saw me drop it, that it would be within the misplaced and found or something. I chosen to call the basic supply store and proceeded on with my drive domestic. I might at slightest drop off my basic supplies at my house sometime recently, going back seeing, as I was as it were approximately 2 minutes absent from domestic. But as I talked with the basic needs store on my drive domestic, They told me that no one had found a wallet, and they did not have one within the misplaced and found. I was disillusioned to listen this. I dreaded the most exceedingly bad that some person had stolen it. I arrived at my house, got my foodstuffs, and started to walk interior. And I got up to my doorstep, though I saw my wallet sitting right within the center of my front step. I was stunned. I strolled over and picked it up. All money that was interior of it was gone, as was my credit card. My charge card was still there in spite of the fact that, as was everything else. I instantly went on to my Keeping Money app and cancelled my credit card so that whoever had it couldn't utilize it. Money was likely almost $100, which I was incapable to induce back. Still, I was cheerful to have my wallet, but I pondered to have dropped it off, and I never found out. In case some person saw me drop it and picked it up, they couldn't have taken after me domestic. Since the wallet was there some time recently, I indeed got back. It was like they knew where I lived, and my driver's permit really had my ancient address on it, so they couldn't have gotten it from there. I didn't have my address anyplace within the wallet. The as it were thing I can think of is that possibly it was one of my neighbours, or someone that by one means or another knew me or where I lived. To me, it still remains a riddle to this day. This happened to my best companion around 2 a long time back, who I'll call Sarah for security reasons. We are both examining within the same city, as it were at distinctive universities, so we're living in several parts of the city. One day, whereas Sarah was studying for her exams, she realized that there was no nourishment within the ice chest, so she'd chosen to go out for a walk and do a few basic need shopping. There was a reasonably expansive and well-supplied general store near to her flat complex, where she stopped by for a few natural products, yogurt and noodles. She went through around 15 minutes within the general store, as it were to be welcomed by a total stranger exterior who began having a little conversation with her. He acted like they knew each other, in spite of the fact that Sarah is positive that she had never seen him some time recently. Generally, my best companion may be an exceptionally courteous and tolerant individual, but moreover exceptionally cautious of outsiders. She depicted him as a brief, overweight fellow with a goatee and a wide-odd smile on his confront. On the other hand, my best companion is tall, and she appears like a young lady you'd not mess with. She'd taken note that his fingers were some way or another jerking, whereas he talked demonstrating that he was anxious. The fellow was at slightest 35, a long time ancient, and my best companion was 23 at the time. Promptly she realized that something was off base with this fellow. To begin with, he welcomed her by saying he had spotted her within the area a few times, and after that continued to inquire her on a coffee date at an adjacent cafe. Sarah was fair standing there stunned and respectfully declined to him, saying she wasn't interested. It made him truly frantic, so he kept demanding that she go with him. When she denied once more, he furiously told her that they would see each other once more before long, calling her by her genuine title. She was completely confused by this, pondering how on soil this creep had found out her genuine title. She had no clue who this fellow was. He didn't appear like a college understudy at all, but or maybe a development laborer, judging by the dress that he was wearing. A bunch of questions came to her intellect. She was anxious that she may have been stalked by him, so she debilitated to call the police in the event that he didn't fair donate up on his progresses and take off her alone. Clearly, my best companion wasn't within the slightest fascinated by this crawl, but in the event that you think our story closes here at that point, you're off base. The another thing she did was portion ways with him. He stood within the same spot for a minute, and after that, as she said, bounced into his car and began taking after her for many pieces down the road in a dark-coloured car with tinted windows. When Sarah realised this, she got indeed more frightened, so she had to require a few lesser-known courses in a range to induce to our flat complex securely. The sun was fair beginning to set at this point. After a few alternate routes, she overseemed to reach back securely sometime recently dim, but she was cleared out feeling jumpy from the complete occurrence, pondering whether he knew where her flat was. She never detailed the occurrence to the police, in spite of the fact that she distinctively recollected his facial highlights and in general appearance. Luckily, nothing ever happened after this, and she has not seen the fellow since. I truly trust it remains that way. My exhortation for everybody is to remain secure out there, since tragically there are a parcel of narcissistic individuals who fair can't take no for in reply. I work at a grocery store, basically stocking shelves. This is often something that happened a couple of months prior. Most of the time that I work it's night times, and once in a while truly late evenings. I'm in college, so it permits me to centre on school amid the day. So a couple of months back I'd been working there for likely about 3 weeks and had fair gotten utilised to everything. The grocery store is sort of huge, and there's a great number of other employees. We contracted this modern fellow. The primary time I taken note him, he came over to me as a adult to crawl. He did beautiful much the same thing as me, but in a diverse segment of the store. The primary time that I saw him, he was gazing at me. He was brief, lovely thin, and had long stringy blonde hair. I had fair wrapped up stocking an item, and was getting to the back to urge another when I got up. I saw him fair standing at the conclusion of the passageway, gazing at me with wide eyes. When I got up and saw him, he vanished behind the path. I overlooked it. In any case, this or exceptionally comparative things happened at slightest 3 or 4 times over the following week. At whatever point, I saw the fellow he appeared to be gazing at me or acting truly unusual and common. He fair appeared a small bit off, to be honest, but it didn't bother me as well much. We all have co-workers that we might not get alongside, but it shouldn't halt us from doing a great work. One time in specific, I was stocking a rack on a calm night. I went through possibly 30 minutes in this one passageway. At one point I turned around, and when I did, I fair scarcely taken note the fellow looking through the passageway from the other side. It was like he created an opening by pushing a few items to the side so that he might gaze at me through the walkway. I as it were looked at him for a minute, and after that played it off. I felt sort of creeped out by this, in a genuine way presently. How long had he been observing me, and why? I'd chosen that I would go over and attempt to casually begin a discussion with the fellow. Perhaps he might clarify his peculiar behaviour. Anything it was, when I was done with my errand some time recently, I begun another. I strolled over to the passageway that he was in. When I drawn closer, he did not see at me or in my heading. I got right another to him, and he still wasn't looking at me. I said hello there, and he looked at me, and after that muttered howdy. I attempted talking casually, inquiring how his day was going and whatnot. The as it were reactions I got were one-worded or exceptionally brief. He didn't appear inviting at all. In truth, he really appeared irritated that I was talking to him. I strolled absent after talking with him for almost perhaps 30 seconds. I concluded that the guy was frightening, and I had no intrigue in association with him once more. I went into the back to urge another cart of items to stock the store shelves. When I got into the back room, in spite of the fact that I kind of had to utilize the restroom, and I'd chosen to do that to begin with. We had a restroom for employees, as it were, that was within the corridor within the back of the store. I went interior, and after utilizing it, washing my hands, I went to take off, but the entryway wouldn't open. I'd listened a few strides and noise outside the entryway, but you couldn't truly listen exterior exceptionally well from within the washroom. I thought nothing of it. I tried opening the entryway a few times, but I couldn't do it. At long last, I had to actually run into the entryway with the full drive of all my body, and it at last came open. There was a shopping cart with a few overwhelming boxes in it that had been stuck right up against the entryway. I had to thump it over in a range to induce out. Instantly, I speculated who had done it. I looked around. I didn't see anyone else within the back at all. I strolled right over to discover the fellow and inquire him why he had done that. Possibly this was his thought of a joke. I got out. Beyond any doubt sufficient, he was as of now gazing in my heading. I strolled right up to him and inquired him why he bolted me within the bathroom. The fellow fair denied it, and after that strolled absent. That didn't alter my intellect at all, and I still knew it was him. After that, I fair got back to work once more. I was presently working at one distant conclusion of the store. I, as it were, had approximately an hour cleared out of work, and needed to induce done what I was assumed to. As I was working within the distant corner at one point, I listened strides behind me. They were truly moderate, and I looked over my bear to see the same fellow. He was lovely distant back, but gazing at me. He was truly getting on my nerves, but I chose to disregard it. Some of minutes afterward, in spite of the fact that he was closer, it was like he was attempting to crawl up on me, and was slowly and unobtrusively moving closer and closer. I looked back to see him standing straightforwardly behind me, presently around 5 feet absent. He wasn't covering up behind anything. I quickly got up and actually ran out of there. He remained standing there passive. I went to the most remote path of the store, away from him as I may, and fundamentally spent the rest of the night fair strolling around the store, looking over my shoulder every 5 seconds, attempting to dodge the fellow. Fortunately, I didn't see him once more that night, and I got off a brief time afterward. I didn't see the fellow once more at all after that. One day another co-worker inquired me in the event that I had listened around Marty. I inquired him who Marty was, and when he depicted him to me, I realized that was the title of the abnormal fellow. I was told that he had been terminated, conjointly captured for punching our boss and attempting to choke him. I was shocked, but moreover not astounded to listen that. I still ponder, in spite of the fact that in case he had been arranging to harm me when he was sneaking up on me that night.